Hello everyone, and in this video we'll be tackling and providing solutions to the top critical mistakes that can absolutely ruin your literature review or research paper, even if you spend lots of time and effort on it. This will give you the best digital tools that you can use, downloadable documents, and tips to make sure that you don't do these critical mistakes. So let's get started. And as you can see, the number one mistake is to have descriptive writing rather than using critical analysis and synthesis. So the first tool that we're going to use to help us become more critical in our writing is a tool called Perplexity AI. And this will help us to find contrasting statements to what we already have. I've heard about this tool before. I have a video that describes how you can use the tool from beginning to end. And I'll leave you the link in the description below. I'm just going to show you an example of how you can use the tool to find contrasting evidence very quickly that can be an initial step into writing your statements. So here where it says ask anything, you go to play.ai. This is the home page. It says ask anything, and I'm going to just enter this here, which basically says provide me with a contrasting evidence to social capital. So this is my statement that I've made in my, say, literature review, my research paper, and I want some contrasting evidence to support that, which says, provide me with the contrasting evidence to social capital is essential for graduate employability. Now I'm going to click on that and go to the response. And what you can see with Perplexity, what I really like about it, and it's for me better than ChatGPT in that it gives you the sources. And so I'm not going to go to the sources that are not academic. I'm going to go to ResearchGate. First, let's just look at the answer, so straight away, I've been given this idea that there is another opinion to the fact that social capital enhances graduate employability, and that is that systematic barriers indicate that things like segregation, racial biases, and socioeconomic disparities can lead to problems and can lead to the inability to certain groups of people to achieve social capital. And not only that, it's given me the reference here, so I can see that it's source number 3. So if I click on that, it will take me to the source and it will open up the page, which is then I'm clicking into it, and we can see from the abstract here, it's telling us that peer social capital was indirectly associated with outcomes, that is progress towards education. So we already have that contrast. It's indirectly associated, and that peer social capital is not leading to these positive outcomes. And now I have a quick idea of some literature that I can use to compile. And this is really important because you will have to be able to synthesize and to provide the various arguments for everything that you state in your literature review. So that was Perplexity AI. Now, on that same point, we're going to look at some strategies on how to structure our sentences to make them more critical. So what I've done here is I've provided you with a list of sentence starters and strategies for writing critical literature reviews. So the first section deals with strategies that you can use to help guide your theoretical frameworks and concepts. So for example, you can start the sentence by saying, although, and then your author asserts that, and then the concept that you're talking about, a close examination reveals, and then you can identify the area that you felt needs more focus. Another example is while the concept of, and then indicate your concept as outlined by your author, offers, and then write something about this concept. Its effectiveness is contingent upon, depends on, and then write the conclusion that you've come up with, or the assumption or the idea that it depends on. How many examples here that I've added into the list, even though author was instrumental in, and then write your idea, it did not explain the underlying factors, and then you're leading on to why you're going to be pursuing that line of thought. And here are some examples as well. Just scroll down. So these approaches, however, have failed to address, and so you're indicating the areas that you're failing to address and then that you need to focus on. However, such explanations tend to overlook the fact that leading to, so you can see that in every single one of these sentences, you're making a point. You're not just reiterating or writing or summarizing the actual theory or the framework. You're making a point, or you're critiquing, or you're identifying something that needs to be addressed within that theory or that someone else has mentioned. So it doesn't always have to be your main point. there's some points, critical statements here about the research gap. So for example, a large number of studies in the field of X have focused on, and then neglecting, and then you're leading up to the gap that you're going to be focusing on because you're saying that there's a missing part. There's some statements on methodology, for example, the methodology employed by, and then the author raises questions about, and then the issue that you've identified, particularly because maybe the statistical analysis they used wasn't relevant, maybe the sample wasn't big enough, but you've identified some kind of methodology critiques that you can mention. Now, the other thing I just quickly want to mention is this article by Justin and Lacey, How to Do or Not to Do a Critical Literature Review. And I've put you the link here, but I'll take you to the actual article. And they identify a number of things that really help you being critical in your article. So they mention that you juxtapose, you place side by side the different authors' ideas within a paragraph. You group the materials in concepts, ideas, and topics. You only use quotations that illuminate, so try and minimize the quotations, summarize the key ideas. And again, what I've done is for each of these sections that they have identified as an important section in your critical review, I've given you some sentences that you can use as well. For example, while author A argues that, and then you write the concept, author B provides a contrasting perspective suggesting some. So you can see we've put side by side these different author views, and then it's very easy to show how they contrast. Group material by concepts, summarize and compare ideas, and here's some ideas that you can use as well. Highlight gaps and check for up-to-date information, and then write some ideas as well. So this document will be available for you to download in the description box. So mistake number 2 is having a lack of the landmark seminal literature in your literature review. And when we say seminal articles, these are the initial articles that introduce the significant ideas within your particular field, and that they have to be the foundation of your good literature review. Okay, so how do we find these seminal articles, the main articles in our field? Well, the first thing you can do is just go to Google Scholar, and then you can type in your keywords here. So I'm just going to add in here employability. And what we'll do is we'll start to look at who is recommended and the number of citations they have. So I've got two things here. I'm looking at the citations cited by 791 other researchers and authors, and I've talked about this before in a previous video. I've downloaded the cite extension, and what it does, it tells me, again, citations. You can see a bit of differences in terms of how many cited, so just be careful here because they're not always accurate, but you can see there's 11 supporting statements, there's 269 mentions of this article, and then I can do that with most of the articles. Here it's 265, 809, 105. This one's 2061. So I know that Paul and Sewell might be interesting authors to look at. So that's a very quick and basic way to start looking at. And then I'll probably click on this one and read it further, the references and so on. So that's a basic way to do that. The other way that I like to do that is to always write graduate employability topic and then add literature review. And so what that does, once you have a literature review, let's just take one that comes up, we go into the literature review. What you'll find is that the authors start to map out the development of the field. So for example, we've got here, the review of literature clearly highlighted the presence of several main theoretical frameworks, and they mentioned that. And then among the many frameworks, the study done by Hillage and Pollard, for example, 1998, can be considered pioneering, since for the first time it summarized all previous and existing ideas about employability. And then it goes on to talk about different authors, and it mentions here Cotton, 1993, and it talks about their employability model, and then it talks about the concepts of Knight and York, 2004, and you've already got a clear timeline of how the field has developed, some of the key authors, and then you can look at their references at the end of the paper, and you will have an indication of what different authors are looking at. And you can do the same with several other literature reviews. So don't depend on just one. You start looking at a second and a third one, and then you'll build a framework of players and the main authority figures in that field. So, mistake number 3 is the lack of recent focused literature. And this mistake has two parts. The first is that you don't have enough recent literature, and a strong review must have not only the seminal works that we just mentioned, but also the recent work, the latest findings, and then highlight the changes over time. And the second issue is having irrelevant content that's not focused. And here, in order for you to be focused, you have to make sure that everything that you include focuses and is relevant to your research aims, objectives, and questions. And to make sure we're both focused and using recent literature here, we're going to use a tool called Elicit AI. And again, I've spoken about this tool before, and I'll put you the link in the description for the full video on how to use it from beginning to end. But for our purposes here, we're going to start with a research question. And in my case, I'm going to add impact of graduate employability. Okay, and I'm going to click on that and see what it returns. So you'll see that the first thing it does is gives us a summary of the top 4 papers that is extracted, and it gives us some literature. Now, I want this research to be recent and to really focus on new trends in the literature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the filters, and instead of having any year here, I'm going to move my years up until let's say here 2020, for example. Okay, 2019, maybe 2020, just to make sure that this is recent. And I'm going to leave all kinds of view types. I'm going to save that. And then now you can see that it's provided me with some recent studies that have focused on factors of graduate employability from 2021, 2022, 2020 as well. And then I can start scanning the different literature and seeing if there are any new interesting ideas that I can add to my papers. So I've got here entrepreneurial universities and the effect and types of vocational education. That could be a new direction that I look at. Another systematic literature review that's from 2022 that I can look at it, and then I'll see all the past literature that's been included. So lots of different types that I can look at here. And the next thing I'm going to do to make sure that my research is more focused, I will go to where it says search or create a column, and I'm going to add a column here that specifically says impact on student perception. Okay, and then I'm going to create. Okay, and now what we'll see is that it's added a column here, and for every paper that it has returned, it will tell us whether this study has something to say on impact on student perception. All play a role in influencing student perception, ultimately their employability. So then this is an article that I probably use and can read in more depth to ensure that I have a specific argument or feedback on student perception. In the paper relates to their belief in their development of soft skills by their institutions. So again, another important one that I could use. So a really useful tool that will help us get relevant, focused literature, and that's Elicit AI. And moving on to mistake number 4, and that's not having a good structure and layout. And what's the best structure for literature review? There's so many ways that you can organize your review, but the basic structure is having a strong introduction where you set the stage for your topic, the main body, you go into existing studies, and this can be organized in different ways, such as thematically, chronologically, or based on your methodology, and then a conclusion where you summarize the main findings and identify the research gaps that you want to address. And just to get a quick structure that we can start initially working with, we're going to use ChatGPT for this, and we're going to enter this prompt, which I'll leave for you in the description. Let's quickly read it. Your task is to provide a detailed structure and layout to help organize a literature review focused on graduate employability in my case, write your topic in your case. This review should critically analyze and synthesize existing literature related to the topic, exploring the key themes, debates, and developments over time. And the literature review should be structured into 3 main sections, like we said, an introduction, the body, and the review, and the conclusions and recommendations section. Here I've specified for the body of the review section, provide me with 3 options to organize the body of the review, including chronological organization, thematic organization, and methodological organization. I'm going to enter that and see what it comes back with. And you can see here that it's now given me certain ideas in terms of how I can structure my literature review based on the 3 sections that I have mentioned. So for the introduction, it's now highlighted that I need the overview of the importance of graduate employability, definitions of the key terms, which you always have to have the key definitions of your concepts and your terms in the introduction, the purpose and the scope, and an outline of the structure. So just a very basic introduction. In the body of the review, you can see now it's given us 3 different options. The chronological organization, so it tracks the historical trends, the evolution of skills, changes that are happening over time. And then there's option thematic organization, organized by the theme and the topics, not by time. Focus mainly on the theoretical frameworks of graduate employability, the key factors that are influencing the interventions, analysis of different types of discipline. And discipline number 3 is option 3 is the methodological organization. So the different research methods that have been employed, and this is specifically on pure methodological study, conclusions and recommendations. So they've actually done a pretty good job. So the final mistake is all about plagiarized work. And this happens when you have not changed the original work that you have read enough by adding your own points, by integrating, synthesizing, as we mentioned in the first mistake, and made it enough of your own work. And sometimes we do this without noticing, without being intent on plagiarizing, by copying in notes and then realizing that we haven't changed it enough. So the best thing you can do is run your work through a plagiarism checker. And one of my favorite tools for this, and I've talked about this before in a previous video for which I'll leave you a link, is CopyLeaks. And I think it picks up the majority of the plagiarized work. You're able to see the exactly copied text. You're even able to tell if the text has been paraphrased by AI, and it shows you a good report with all the areas that need to be, for example, changed, paraphrased, and adapted. Now, this tool is free to an extent. You get a certain number of scans that you're allowed to do, but then after that, you have to pay for it. So if you're using it quite consistently, I would recommend to look for the upgraded version. Documents that I had scanned in, and it shows you, for example, the similarity report. Here's 43.1%, shows you the text that's identically copied with the dark orange, and then if there's any minor changes, and it shows you if there's any paraphrased areas. This just gives you a good idea in terms of what you need to be looking at, going back to rephrase and to rewrite again before you submit. Now, the other thing it does on the right-hand side is that it gives you the actual references from where the information has been taken, and that's really useful as well. So if you've forgotten any references, that you can go back and you can add these in. So I hope you found this video useful, and I hope to see you in the next video.